Hi, it's Bea with Crafting Daily Dose. Today I have an interactive alternative for the August 2023 paper pumpkin kit called Meaningful Flowers. We're going to be using pieces from this project, including the envelope, to make this beautiful card that is even more unforgettable when it's opened up. Isn't that so cool? Stick around and I will show you how it's done. Here are the supplies for the project. My card base is Lemon Lolly cardstock, and it's going to open up in the landscape orientation. So it is 11 inches by 4 1/4 inches, scored down the middle at 5 1/2 inches. I have another piece of cardstock to layer on top of that. This is Daffodil Delight, and it is 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches. The layer that goes next is this piece, which has been cut from the envelope. It is just a little bit smaller than the other one, so it is 5 1/8 by 3 7/8 of an inch. I got that piece by first cutting off the sides of my envelope so that it would open up, and then I trimmed just underneath the score line where the envelope flap is. And from there, I trimmed down some of the bottom to make it the correct height and some of the sides to make it the correct width. I tried to keep as much of this design from up here as possible because what's underneath that is more plain and not quite as interesting. So if you'll cut right underneath that score line, you'll get to keep more of the pattern. Now, as I mentioned, this piece is going to layer on top of my cardstock. And technically, you don't really need this piece, it's kind of optional, but I like to use it because the envelope is so light that there's not going to be a lot of weight on the front of my card. And by adding this piece of cardstock, visually it looks a little bit more finished, but also it adds just a tiny bit more weight, and that's going to help my card stay closed a little bit more flat. Even if you don't have two different colors to use here, you could use the same color. It just helps to have that extra weight. This is my message panel for the inside, and it is a piece of basic white cardstock. This one is 4 3/4 of an inch by 3 1/2 inches. And then this piece of cardstock here is my actual mechanism. It's 3 3/4 of an inch by 1 inch, and it's been scored at 3/8 of an inch from each side. There's always a link to the blog post in the description box, and from there you can see a summary of those measurements. Now notice that my card base and my little mechanism strip are both the same color. I'm using Lemon Lolly, and if you're using something different, that's fine. Just make sure that they match. Now from the kit, I am using this card base with the forget-me-nots. We are going to do some additional preparation to this piece together. I'm using the forget-me-nots die cut, as well as this little label, this little banner here. This is the linen thread from the kit, and I'm using 10 inches. That's a little bit longer than the instructions say, but I find that the extra length makes it easier to work with. And then there are some pretty clear embellishments from the kit, but I'm choosing to use my brushed brass butterflies instead. I think it goes nicely with the flowers, and these are also flat enough that I can use them on the inside of my card too. And then I'll stamp my sentiment with the Pretty Peacock ink from the kit. I've got what I need here, and we're ready to get started. I'll begin with stamping that sentiment onto the banner. This is the Pretty Peacock ink, and I've got my silicone craft sheet underneath for a little bit of extra cushion. I've got my trimmer out so that we can prepare this piece together. We're going to be doing a small partial cut, and for that, we're going to be paying attention to the measurements that are right here on the guide relative to this little groove that is on the side of the cutting blade. So to begin, I'm going to take my card base and I'm going to turn it upside down, and then I'm going to line up the score line with the center of my track. So here's the track on the trimmer that the blade goes into. I'm going to line up this score line, so it's right there, and then I'm going to start at the 1/2 inch mark. So looking at the measurement here, I know that I'm at 1/2. Now I'm going to press my blade down and I'm going to go down to just past 1.5 inches. The actual measurement that I'm going for is 1 9/16. That just means that I'm going down to the 1.5 mark and then adding just one additional tick mark, an extra 1/16 of an inch. So I'm pressing my blade in at the 1/2 inch mark and then going down to 1 9/16. So you can see that now we have a little cut there, and this is going to be what the mechanism slides through. I'm going to turn this counterclockwise so that this panel is at the top, and I'm going to trim this down to just 4 1/4 inches. So looking at the 4 1/4 inch mark over here, I'm lining this edge up, and then I'll go ahead and cut. So that's what I end up with. After cutting the piece, I want to use my bone folder to curl it slightly. This piece is going to curve up when the card is opened, so this helps make the paper more flexible. Now that our panel is ready, we're going to go ahead and put it inside the card. Now, oftentimes when you see me add a layer on, I take my Stampin' Seal and I do just short little swipes in the corners. But in this case, when the mechanism works and pulls, there's going to be a fair amount of stress and tension on the paper, and we don't want that to cause things to lift up. So we want to be very generous here with the adhesive. Whatever you use, you want a fair amount of it, so do a lot of swipes with the Stampin' Seal, or better yet, the Stampin' Seal Plus. You can use several strips of the tear and tape that came with the kits, but burnish it down well. Or I'm just going to use my multi-purpose glue, and because I'm going to spread it all over the back of this panel, I'm going to use the broad side instead of the fine tip that I normally use. Now I'm going to center that horizontally over the inside of my card. So again, my card opens this way. Now the top and bottom edges should line up here. The advantage of using glue is that I have time to wiggle things around and adjust before the glue sets up. Next comes the mechanism strip. Now I have folded along both of these score lines at the end, and I've worked the paper back and forth several times so that it's nice and flexible there. I'm going to thread this through that slit that I had cut. So I'm going to find it first and then push it on through. And I'm going to push it until this end lines up with the crease on the card. So I want that right up against the crease without crossing over it. Then I'm just going to leave that in place. I'm going to fold this back so you can see. Now I want to put adhesive just on this tab here. Again, be generous with whichever adhesive that you're using. I'm using glue, and I want to make sure that I go all the way from the edge to the crease. This is a smaller area, so I'm switching back to the fine tip. Now I'm going to lay this down, and I'll do my best to get this kind of straight. So the gap along the bottom here should be about the same the whole way. You don't want this to be crooked. I'm going to double check to make sure that the other end is still right up next to the crease, and then I'm going to fold this panel with the flowers on it. I'm going to fold that right on top of the exposed adhesive. lift it up and take a peek. That looks like it's holding pretty well. Now I'm going to come over on this side and I'm going to put glue again just on this tab. You want to be careful as you're doing this that you're only putting glue on the tab and not on the card itself. And if you're unsure, you could always put something underneath, some scrap underneath it. This is a little extra insurance as you're putting on the glue if you want. Now I'm going to take the front of my card and I'm going to fold it over again onto that exposed adhesive. And I'll let that set up. Very gently, I'm going to test it and see. Oh, and it's pretty humid here. You can see my glue did not set up, so it needs more time. Okay, let's test it again, opening very slowly and carefully. And this time it is holding, and you can see what happens. That panel of flowers pulls up and curves. Looks really pretty. Since we're here on the inside, let's go ahead and finish decorating it. I'm going to put on the message panel. It's going to be centered on the inside of the card front, and the measurements are designed so that it doesn't get in the way of the mechanism. Now I'll go ahead and add a few butterflies here. I want to place my butterfly down here, but I don't want it to interfere with the mechanism. So I'm going to temporarily close this so I can see where it's safe to put the butterfly and not have it get in the way. The inside is done, and now it's time for the front. I'm just centering these layers on top of one another. Now there's no tension on these papers, so you don't need nearly as much adhesive. I've got the forget-me-not die cuts, and I'm going to use my bone folder to slightly curl up the edges. This helps to add a little more dimension to the front. I'm putting glue just in the center of the flower clusters and along the stems, but not all the way to the edges. Here's the piece of linen thread, and I think the easiest thing to do here is to make 2 loops. This is the bunny ear method. I'm going to have the 2 loops, and then I will tie them around one another and then pull to adjust the size of the loops before I tighten them. Now you can put just a little dab of glue here, or a very small piece of that tear and tape. Or if you have leftover mini glue dots from past paper pumpkins like I do, you can take the backing off of one of them, press the knot of your bow onto it, squish it down, and then lift it off, and that should carry the adhesive with it. Go ahead and put my bow up here, like so. And then I'll put some dimensionals on the back of the label before putting it on. I'm wrestling with the ends of my bow a little bit here, trying to decide how I want them to lie. Let's finish up with a few butterflies for the outside. There's our finished card. We've created a beautiful scene for the outside and an even more exciting one on the inside. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin but don't yet have a demonstrator, you can find my subscription link as well as all of my other links in the description box below. If you get a chance to make this project, I would love to see it, so share it in my Facebook group or tag me if you're sharing elsewhere. I hope to craft with you again next time, and until then, have a great day.